for coming out to the Cartoon Art Museum today for the Smithsonian Museum Day. Really excited to have all these new faces come into our museum. Really what we're about, exposing cartooning as an art to as many people as we can and engaging people in all the different ways that comics kind of shape our lives and help tell the stories that are most important to all of us. And comics have just so much potential, and it is my great honor to introduce you guys to Ben Costa and James Parks, who we have here today, the creators of Rickety Stitch. And they're going to talk a little bit about what that's like and this sort of how that creation process happens, and sort of what is it like to be a real live cartoonist? Is it the famed dream that it feels like? Is it the hard work of a struggling artist? But I'll let you give them the full details.
Tune in to find out.
Yeah, thank you. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to save those for the end of the talk, and then we'll do a little bit of moderated Q&A with them as well. Thank you guys. With no further ado, Ben Costa and James Parks.
Hello everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming out. I'm James, this is Ben. We've got kind of an interesting history together. We've known each other since the 2nd grade, and we've been writing and drawing comics since we were little kids. The first stuff we ever wrote was a bunch of Spider-Man comics done with crayons and construction paper about how Spider-Man and Shaquille O'Neal teamed up to save the city of New York. And then it kind of spitballed into high school, where we like to make movies together and continue to make comics. And then eventually it led to the creation of Rickety Stitch.
Yeah, Rickety Stitch, we came up with the idea over 15 years ago, and worked on it at various stages over the last 15 years. I think we pitched it to a publisher in 2007, but it got rejected, and then finally got with the publisher in 2015, and it came out last year, and then the second book came out this year.
So the story of Rickety Stitch, it's a fantasy adventure series about a skeleton bard who wants to find out who he was when he was alive. And so he goes on this epic quest throughout this fantastical world with goblins and imps and ogres and unicorns to basically find out who he literally is. He has no idea who he was in the past. And we just love the idea of a character that was anonymous like that.
Right, so being a cartoonist is probably the most glamorous job. That's not true. Our process is we get together on Google Hangouts, and we get in a Google Doc, and we write a script together real time, because we both live in different cities, and
it starts out with something that we call, that's part of our process that we call the Great Riff, where Ben and I get together and just literally tell the story of the book back and forth to each other for a period of several days until we've tightened up the story and know the kind of adventure that we want to tell with Rickety and all of his pals. Then we actually do just get into the same Google Doc and, like a two-headed monster, finish each other's sentences until it's done for us.
Yeah, it takes about 2 or 3 months for us to write a script. And then I'll go and draw what are thumbnails, little sketches of each page in every panel, where you have to compose each panel. It's its own thing. And that takes about a month or 2, and then I'll move on to beginning a long process of drawing each page. And so each page has to be penciled, inked, and then I color it, and then I do the lettering, and the whole process is like 1.5 to 2 years for each book. So that's not glamorous, but it's fun, and you get satisfaction from each page that you do. And I can start drawing for you now.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the books and all the characters.
So Rickety Stitch Book 1, The Road to Eppley, is the story of Rickety remembering a song from the past. He remembers this song, and he can't figure out how he learned it, but he actually wrote it himself. and goes on this grand adventure to discover this lost city that he believes he might be from. Ben's going to draw Rickety Stitch right here. So the name Rickety Stitch is got kind of an interesting story to it. When we first created the character, we drew a lot of mini comics of a singing skeleton, and we even did some comics for our school newspaper. And we kept calling him Lickety Split because we liked the cadence of the words, how they sounded together. And then we decided, oh, you know, he's rickety like a skeleton, and he stitches songs together, so why don't we just make up something in his world that's a stitch, is what goblins call a bard or a minstrel. And then he can go about being wacky, fun-loving. So there we go.
There you go, that's Rickety Stitch. Easy as that. And talk about his best friend, the gelatinous goo.
So Rickety Stitch's best friend is a little jelly guy named the Gelatinous Goo. And he is just that. He's like a little bit of jello. And he's really smart. He's really brave. Except for nobody can understand what he's saying. He can only communicate in punctuation.
He's also way smarter than Rickety Stitch.
By several orders of magnitude, he's smarter than Rickety Stitch. And so Rickety and Goo are best friends because nobody else likes them. They're both sort of outcasts. And so they found each other working together in a dungeon, because that's what monsters do in a fantasy world. They work in a dungeon, and they happen to work for a company called Subterranean Pits and Layers, LLC.
I was drawing someone else, but now I'll go where the conversation is going.
So Ben is drawing Rickety Stitch's boss. He's a mean goblin named Lloyd Goulihan. So the beginning of Rickety Stitch, he's working for this company, this dungeon company, and he's particularly bad at it. He's not a very good employee, and he and Goo get fired, and so they get cast off into the world above. And that's when Rickety decides that he's going to change his life and go on a quest of discovery.
Classic.
Classic cartoon comedy. Why I oughta.
And so Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo, in the first book, one of the first other outcast characters they meet is a little imp. His name is Ziggy.
So Ziggy is short for his real name, Ziggly Dorgelmorgan. And he works for an ogre living in a haunted woods, in a haunted forest called the Grimly Wood.
So he's got little bat wings and a little round belly. And his feet are kind of like lizard feet. And this isn't a good angle, but he has a little pigtail. He's always saying this.
He's a bit of a troublemaker.
Okay.
We talked about the ogre, Golo.
Golo the Gargantuan. He's an ogre that lives in a castle called Castle Lake, and he ate the king of Castle Lake as well as all of the subjects of the kingdom. And he got so big that he couldn't get out of the castle anymore. He couldn't get out of the doors, he couldn't get out of the windows, and he ended up being imprisoned there. So he makes Ziggly Dorgelmarken, the little imp guy, do his bidding to bring him snacks and other wayfarers and travelers that have no
And
idea.
Golo has a brother. And he's attached, his head is attached right next to his own. He only has one eye. And he wears the crown.
He's a little trophy. Golo's brother's name is Olog.
And he's got a little tiny dinosaur arm. Who next?
I say you draw the gnome.
Okay, no.
So on Rickety's adventure, he meets a gnome named Nerman Fuddle, or specifically El Nerman Fuddle. And he learns a lot about himself when he meets this gnome. And in the world of Rickety Stitch, gnomes are very special. They are they're cute and homely and very hobbity, and very easy to get along with and fun. But they're also really, really powerful wizards. And they're the guardians of the forest.
There you go, that's Nerman.
Nerman the gnome.
And along with Nerman, the unicorn named Zorgana watches over the forest. She's not your typical unicorn. It's kind of like if Conan the Barbarian was a unicorn.
She's very stoic and hard as nails, and takes her role as a guardian very seriously. Ben and I are both really big Conan fans, so we wanted to actually give the unicorn Conan's haircut.
the devil.
Do you bring the hype crew with you everywhere?
Because they're awesome.
What do you think?
That's probably it for book one. Don't want to give away too many spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers here. We'll be good.
I want to see spoilers.
So Rickety Stitch's adventures continue in Rickety Stitch Book 2, The Middle Route Run. So after the events of Rickety Stitch Book 1, of which I will not spoil, Rickety continues his quest and decides that he's going to go north towards the city, or the lost city of Eppley. He quickly finds out that the only way to go anywhere in this world is along a trade road called the Middle Route Run, which is the most dangerous road in the world. And so it's a little bit like Mad Max Fury Road meets the Muppets. And along the way, Rickety meets some people that he's never met before. He meets other musicians and performers that are like himself, who value, singing and dancing and pantomiming and puppet shows and all that. And so one of his pals that he meets early is a boggart named Busky Chesterton. And a boggart in our world is like a happy goblin, as opposed to a mean one like Lloyd.
So Busky is also known as the One Boggart Band. He's adorned with a bunch of instruments all over. He's got a horn and a harmonica. And a drum strapped to his back. He's got a concertina. He also has a hidden xylophone on his chest that just hangs behind everything. So Busky is just one of the fellow bards. He meets a whole crew, and one of the other ones is Duke.
Duke?
Duke Aloysius the Merrymanderer. He's a thespian. He loves the stage, and he loves to perform plays and one-man shows. Duke is a fan of the finer things, but he lives in a world where there are no finer things, so he's a bit of an outcast as well. It's a running theme in Rickety Stitch. Nobody likes anybody.
And then the other two bards are Gelda and Maud, the Organostrum twins.
Oh, that's sweet. I like that.
So the organostrum twins play a really complicated old instrument called an organostrum. And Ben and I discovered this instrument and really wanted to incorporate it into the story because it is so unique in that it's a long guitar-like harpsichordy instrument that if you want to play it for an hour, you have to clean it for 2 hours afterwards. So it's cumbersome to want to become an organostrum player. But they're also huge, so we like the idea of, oh, well, what if we had these characters that were twins that worked together to play it simultaneously, so you didn't have to lay it out onto a table or something.
So it takes 2 people to play. One person over here spins a little crank, and then this one kind of manipulates these little rods. And then we have the main villain of book 2.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
So on the middle route run, there's characters that they want to traverse it so that they can trade and they can get to cities that are important to the economy. And one of those gentlemen is the villain. His name is Krog, and he's a goblin tycoon. He is funding an expedition across the middle route run because it takes a lot of resources and a lot of people to successfully do it because it's filled with bandits and monsters and wolves and giant birds, and you name it. And so he's kind of a railroad tycoon type act. He's very mean. He's mean and he's greedy. So Ben's drawing another villain. His name is Lord Marshal Threx, and he's a metal guy. He is the metal guy. He's a really mean metal guy. He's a black knight that is in search for treasure, and he attacks the caravan with Rickety on it. The Rickety Stitch world has lots of different tones in it, and this is a good example of Rickety Stitch having weighty or serious moments. He is happy-go-lucky. The world is kind of this apocalyptic, cartoony world, but in it there are real heroes and real villains. They're just kind of sparsely placed throughout the story. And Threx is an example of a real villain, a real threat. And so he's got we wanted to give him a menacing look that's different than the kind of comedic Krog or Gola. And that's about it.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions.
So, does anyone have any questions for Awesome Crickets? Yes.
How does the book take place? How does it go awesome?
Wait, what? How does it, where?
Where is the book placed?
Yeah,
And how does it go awesome at the end?
So where does the book take place?
Yeah,
And
where does it take
how do you
place
tell
and how'd
such
you guys
awesome
make it so
stories?
awesome?
I think is what we're going for.
Yeah.
The book takes place in a fantasy world that we created called Eden. And we just make it awesome by being awesome.
See, look, hard work and determination.
Yeah, that's a better translation for being else. Hard work and determination, everybody.
The second book,
Nose to the grindstone.
if what you're asking is, the second book really comes to an action-packed ending. Is that what you're asking?
Is that about it?
Yeah.
There's a big chase and a big fight in the end. I'll tell you that.
Before I take the next question, I'll kind of have a follow-up to that. Is like, where do you get all of your inspiration for your world? I noticed that whenever you're describing stuff, you're using that kind of trick of using pre-existing things and saying it's like this meets this, and it seems like maybe you have a file of like what are the most diametrically opposed things, and how can we put them together to make something like really cool.
We really do. So obviously tons of comics influence us. A lot of pop culture from when we were growing up. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons every weekend growing up, and that's been a huge inspiration for us.
We still play.
We still play.
That's not fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, like, lots of, because it doesn't, when we tell people like, oh, Conan the Barbarian was an inspiration, they're like, what are you talking about? This is like Conan the Barbarian. And it's like, there's
The amount of times that we watched Conan the Barbarian, like, it can't not be an influence.
and then had long stretches of working sessions about Rickety Stitch after being re-inspired by Conan the Barbarian. But I think for us, it's like the world building. It's the mythos. And the skill like Tolkien had to be able to create this entire world, that's something that Ben and I are really active with. And on our website, we actually write like lore posts that just will call out something from the book and we'll tell a mini story about what that cup was or what this tree is, or just because that it actually helps us flesh out the world and flesh out characters better to create better motivations, at least from our perspective.
We actually have a lot of those lore entries in the back of the book.
Yeah, in the back of the book, you can read lore entries where we talk about things that are not exactly on the page but are intended for the world.
Awesome. So if you hadn't had enough, there's even more.
Yeah. We're also really inspired by the music, and Rickety Stitch has a lot of music in it. It's core to his character and core to the books. So at the back of the book, you can go to a URL to actually hear the music that's there. That's been recorded by our friends, by one who's actually sitting here right now, Mr. Corp. So definitely check it out. It's brilliant stuff, and it really inspires us to be able to listen to what we have had, written in our brains for years and years.
Does anyone else have any questions?
As cartoonists, is that your full-time jobs? And how, were you always cartoonist? What led you to, to what you guys are doing now?
My full-time job, but I've been cartooning for over 10 years. And it's only been my full-time job in the last 2 years. So I did a lot of self-publishing of other comics, went to a lot of conventions, sold books myself. And, so yeah, luckily I'm at a point where we're doing Rickety Stitch, and it's my full-time job right now.
What about for you?
I actually started my career writing comics for a publishing house, and then I got wrapped up into Silicon Valley stuff. And by day, I'm a brand strategist, so it's like completely different. Although there's a lot of the storytelling does do have a day job.
Yeah. For people who work in branding, it's all about like creating a story about that.
Yeah.
So it's a way to kind of have another side to you.
Right. Stories are core to my being, so I've just found myself in that space.
Any other questions?
Do you have like any other books?
This is our first major published book. We do have other books that we've done. I made a comic about a Shaolin monk, 2 volumes of that. It's called Pong, the Wandering Shaolin Monk. You can Google it. It's a historical fiction martial arts comic.
We're also in the process of working on Rickety Stitch Book 3.
So you kind of had this in the works for like 15 issues. I guess like I imagine that it would like change similar over the years. So like what was the core idea that kind of like, persisted throughout those 15 years, and like kind of what helped you keep going on this one project versus kind of doing what I do, which is like get distracted and like see something shiny and like look at something else.
So what core element stayed with us for 15 years?
Yeah.
I think Rickety Stitch, the character of Rickety Stitch, and the hero being a storyteller. He's a storyteller, he's on a quest of self-discovery, and he's a skeleton. He's a very atypical main character for a book. And so we love the idea of him being a skeleton because nothing is more anonymous than that. And so he has no physical clues as to who he could possibly be. He's been raised from the dead by some unknown force. And we just loved the unknowable mystery of that and where that could lead us from in terms of the adventure.
We also love being huge D&D players over the years. We just love the idea of taking a skeleton and like what's usually an unintelligent blob of ooze and making that the hero and someone you can like relate to.
Yeah, no, it seems pretty cool that you guys have like setting is like focused on like I guess like kind of usually the bad like guy.
Right.
Like over the artifact.
I know that a lot of cartoonists have actually said that playing D&D is a good way to exercise storytelling and to try out different ideas before you actually try them in a final format like your books. So it's just this great way to sort of test the waters with things, whether it's
Absolutely.
storytelling.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely a huge creative tool for us to just flex our brains in that way that you can't always do in your day-to-day life. And so, yeah, it's been indispensable.
Yeah, we've made hundreds of characters playing D&D. You write a backstory, you come up with their hook, and maybe you don't always play them, but like we've made hundreds of characters.
It's so true. And sometimes folks will ask us in events like this, like, how do you come up with these characters? Is it really hard for you to come up with these characters? And Ben and I feel like we're cheating because we can just generate characters like it's like so quickly.
With a roll of the die.
Yes. Just for us, it's just so we've been trained so well to just create new characters.
And it's cool that sort of role-playing gaming world is so expansive. Do you guys play anything other than Dungeons and Dragons, or is that your mainstay?
That's the mainstay for me.
You can do sci-fi stuff now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I play a lot of Star Wars.
Oh right, yeah, like Star Wars.
Made my own custom Star Wars game that none of you can play.
It's mine. I brought it from home.
Any other questions in the audience? Yes.
So that's for Ben. Are you pretty much just a self-taught artist, or did you actually go to any kind of school or training, or how did you kind of develop your style?
I felt self-taught for a long time. I did not go to school for art. Towards the end of college, I decided to take an art class, and it was kind of around the time that I started drawing comics because we couldn't find an artist for our comics that we wrote. And then I went to graduate school at CCA here, but I was in the writing program still. And I went there specifically so I could take art classes on the side. So I felt like I always felt kind of not one of the artists in the class, but yeah, I got some training, and all the while, I think my biggest training was drawing hundreds of pages of comics that no one will ever see, just like the Star Wars game.
Awesome. Any other questions?
So did you find yourself kind of emulating other artists, or did you stick with your stuff from the beginning and work your own?
I think I was definitely emulating Stan Sakai in the beginning. He does Usagi Yojimbo, and I was like very much like Hollywood Water and Shadow Monk that I was doing. Just the simple line work or look simple can be deceptively simple. And you can see that in the face of Rickety Stitch and everybody else.
Yeah, being able to put an expression on a skeleton is something that Ben is brilliant at, because it's impossible otherwise. And so he makes what would normally be kind of a ghoulish character a happy-go-lucky, cute little guy.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. Okay, so
I'm going to ask the last question. Do you have a sort of, I haven't read the second book yet, but is it open-ended, the saga? Do you see it kind of concluding, or how, if you can say without giving too much away? I don't know if that's a fair enough question, but some people want to keep it going.
So we do have a conclusion in mind. We initially planned 6 books, and actually from the very beginning we have a conclusion in mind for the story. We like the idea of tying it up, although there's tons of opportunities should it expand.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming out today. Can everyone give them another round of applause?